Q&A. How's it going, August?
It is awesome to be here. Okay, thank you so much. It's such a privilege to join you in the RadRead community here.
Awesome. And for those of you on video, if you ever want to feel bad about your video setups, just have August join you, because it's like, I asked him earlier, I said, August, tell me about your background. And he said, the one behind me or my professional background? Because look at that. I mean,
on Zoom calls, I'm always asked about the one behind me more often than my professional background.
So I've been, August doesn't need an introduction, but we have all, if you're on this call, you have learned a ton about systems design, about Notion, about productivity, about prioritization from his epic YouTube channel, which is just, it's crazy to think that he started that channel 4 months ago, and it's one of the go-to resources for the entire world on really maximizing Notion. So it's a real honor to have August here today. So this is how it's going to work. August and I are going to chat the philosophical, the system design. We're going to hear a little bit of his background for about 20 minutes. Then we all know you love Notion setups. You love to watch people walk through them, show their tricks, show their emojis and icon usage. And so August is going to walk us through his part of his dashboards. And then lastly, we'll open it up to Q&A, and depending on how it goes, we'll probably field questions through the chat, and then I'll ask them to August. So without any further ado, I just wanted to start with this question, August. You walk into, I mean, it's COVID now, so you're not presumably walking into bars, but you walk into to a party, or you walk into a socially distant gathering, and someone asks you for the first time, so what do you do? How do you answer that question?
Well, it's for most of my career, it's been a complex answer, but if anything, it's getting simpler. Now, I help people implement systems and processes that let them live better lives, often with small business owners, but not exclusively. It's pretty much that simple.
Systems and processes. And so let's zoom back a bit, because it turns out that you have developed quite what I refer to as an anti-fragile career, one rich with pivots and rich with head-scratching moments as well. And so I just wanted to take you back. You mentioned that you had you're talking about going to HBS, Harvard Business School, and then getting into the world of consulting, and then somehow taking photography, like world-class photography on mountain climbing ranges across the world. So how does one go from HBS to being a premier photographer in kind of the outdoor adventure arena?
Yeah, my background is very zigzaggy, and I think a lot of the best backgrounds are very, very zigzaggy, not a lot of straight lines. But that turn was pretty simple. I basically pursued and got the jobs I wanted most, and when I got them, they were not what I had hoped they would be. It was just such a disappointment and disillusionment that I actually enjoyed the pursuit of the jobs much more than the jobs themselves, which leads to a life of continually leaving jobs and pursuing more jobs. It becomes a sport to pursue jobs, but then getting them is just such an anticlimactic experience. So after doing that a few times, I ended up thinking, all right, I'm clearly pursuing the wrong kinds of jobs here. What would be more fulfilling? What would be more meaningful? And I reflected back to the work, quote, work I had done that had made me the happiest. And back in high school and college, I was the photo editor. I was the the photo editor, the yearbook photography editor. I would just lived in the dark room, and I'm dating myself a bit, but we had dark rooms back when I went to high school. So I was just obsessive photo geek across the board, and I loved it. I mean, it was just immersive work. And I was like, I want to have my career to be like that. So at this stage, digital, of course, had taken over, but I started migrating into creating. I left the last consulting job I had, which was a team. I found that I didn't like working in large corporate teams on consulting engagements. It was not quite as exciting as I'd hoped it would be. Even I like the intellectual aspect of it, but it became, when you start divvying it up into individual components, it becomes less intellectual and much more mundane. Building PowerPoint slides isn't all it's cracked up to be. So I left the last of a series of both internal corporate strategic planning jobs and consulting positions, and I moved to Lake Tahoe. And I just started doing a mix of climbing and whitewater kayaking and outdoor adventure stuff and writing and photography. And that sort of led to, my photography took off much faster than my writing. And I started getting calls from ad agencies in the Bay Area to do some commercial shoots. And it turned out I loved that. So that became my new path. And I started becoming a commercial photographer, moved to San Francisco, then LA. That led to DP work on TV commercials, which led to building a whole production company of my own doing TV commercials and brand films. So that was super exciting.
Wow. And so how and when does Notion show up into your life? And tell us about the spark that attracted you to it.
Well, it was a lot of the background that made Notion spark. So as I'm building a production company, that's an incredibly systems and process oriented kind of company. It's a lot of details. It's a lot of repetition of different steps over and over, but where everything has to be done extremely well at extremely high quality, very little margin for error, tight deadlines, hard deliverables, very demanding clients. I mean, it's a very tough environment to consistently do high volume work, and that requires very efficient systems and processes. So that, and then that led to moving into a migration of technology and media, which led to more systems and processes, now working for different companies and implementing those in different companies. So by the time I discovered Notion, I'm already doing a lot. I'd come back to consulting, but doing individual projects where I can do them myself, implementing the kinds of systems and processes I had done for my production company for a wide range of very advanced tech companies in augmented reality and virtual reality and AI and aerospace even. So different companies that also have similar demands. And so I'm building this out. So I'm already doing a lot of the work that Notion ultimately is perfectly suited for.
And sorry to interrupt you, is this in Trello or like the usual suspects?
Well, that was evolving too. So it was in Trello, it was in Asana at one point, it was in Rike. I was using it a lot of different platforms. Then when I discovered Airtable, that was like, oh my God, this is it. Finally, the thing I need, Airtable. And then I discovered Notion after that. I know you made a similar Airtable to Notion progression as well. So I can totally relate to that. So you're constantly searching for the right tool, but I never saw a jump as big as I did when I saw Notion. Now, the big handicap is the API, of course, right? So we still have that handicap. And that was do I move into a platform without an API? And sometimes it's not the right platform for clients, right? You got to pick the right client. And that's largely a size-based thing in many cases. But once we have the API, I also feel like now I'm building for the post-API world now, even though we don't have it. So working a little bit handicapped on the expectation.
Got it.
And a lot of my clients do that as well. But by the time I discovered the Notion, I was ready for Notion, too, because it wasn't just like I had to start building this whole philosophy and approach. Now that I discovered a tool I can do it, I had the need for it, and this just filled that need.
Love it. So zooming you out, so we talked about corporate and consulting and production companies and systems, zooming you out to the personal side. And I know for you, it sounds like personal and professional are deeply integrated. When you think about the life design, system designs for your personal life, are there any overarching principles or themes or sources of inspiration that kind of have led you to where your personal system is today? So for example, for me, a big one, as you all know, is it's a heavy GTD focus. And so you could see GTD's footprints on so much of what I do. In your personal productivity system that we're going to jump into, if we had to trace the idea lineage back, where would we land?
Well, there have been many fragmented influences, but there isn't one that sparked it. It was largely a series of the off-the-shelf solution is not meeting my needs and needing to reinvent or at least work around them. Now to be clear, GTD has influenced my system, no question. But there are parts of it that it didn't work for me. So my inclination is very DIY and tweak and modify and change. So I never went deep down the GTD rabbit hole. But now looking back, I see there's a lot of GTD in my system because GTD was so influential across so many systems, right? It's like, even if you didn't look at GTD, you're going to be influenced by GTD. Though I did look at it. And I think has a lot of profound insights. So I have a lot of respect for GTD, but I felt free to modify and change. And that's one thing that I encourage everybody, even when I'm teaching a particular system, customize, modify. And that's one of the biggest beauties of Notion, is it makes that more possible than any, platform before.
Got it.
So it encourages that. But I just tweak and modify and look for pain points and constantly shape. I think of it as a block of clay rather than a machine.
Got it.
So, but there's no one point I can look at other than a lot of things didn't work. So I set that back and ask, what would work better?
Got it. And what I love, and I've been immersed in your system, preparing for this conversation and just learning, is that you have this incredible integration. On one end, there's like daily firefighting, which is just react, whack the game of whack-a-mole on tasks and so on. And on the other end, there's the existential questions, like what's the point? And you have done a phenomenal job of really bridging the two. And so I think you start with kind of your daily action zone, which is like a very manageable, like to-do list approach. And then you land on goal outcomes, project outcomes, like KPI, OKR type stuff. And then you get into vision, values, and inspiration. Could you give us the kind of that's me paraphrasing. Could you give us the kind of the overarching system in your own words?
Yeah, at the most fundamental level, my whole approach in the system that I present, the Notion design system, is all about two things. It all boils down to two things: focus and alignment. Everything is going to be touched by those two things. And ultimately, I think that's what matters most to make things happen in one's life. So focus is about looking at the thing that matters at any given moment, avoiding the distractions, zeroing in, and getting the thing done. Like, that's not so easy. It sounds really easy, but it's super hard to do that consistently. To do the one thing that you have told yourself you're going to do is hard, but you need to develop a system that helps facilitate that. The other half is alignment, so that you know that the thing you're doing is the right thing, because it is way more important to be working on the right thing inefficiently than to do the wrong thing efficiently. So productivity is not the priority. It's second. Productivity is perhaps second or even third. The most important thing is that you're doing the right thing, and that's where alignment comes in. So the ability to have a direct lineage from the aspirations of your life, the things that matter most to you in terms of how you want to live your life and who you want to become, to the literal thing you're doing hour by hour, that is the magic trick. And that's the thing that I didn't see any systems doing. And then Notion, more than any system I've ever seen, lets you construct that lineage from the high-level aspirations to the hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute activities. And that's the magic trick, I think, ultimately.
And so for example, one thing that I'm wrestling with is that I would like to start a nonprofit, the RAD Foundation. Y'all heard it here first. Now, the thing is, though, that could be something that happens in like 1 year, 3 years, maybe a decade. And so how would something like that, how would I plug, if I think of like what I'm doing on a daily basis to life aspiration, it feels like it falls somewhere in the middle. How would you coach me through your framework to put more meat on that bone so that it just doesn't wither on the vine and 3 years goes by and no progress has been made?
Sure. I mean, first we have to start by saying there are a lot of things we like to do, and we literally don't have time to do everything we want to do. We have to recognize we actually have to make choices. We have to actually not do some things. Strategy is more about choosing what not to do than choosing what to do. I mean, in business and in life. So the question is it important enough to you to make it one of the precious few things you're really going to commit and pour yourself into? So you need to really test that hypothesis that you do want to do this at that level. And if you can recognize earlier that it's not at that important of a level, you're going to save yourself a lot of self-criticism and, worry and great reflection, up front. So, but if it really is something that's super important to you, then you got to make it happen. And then you plug it in at the level. We can look at my system. In my system, that would go in at the value goals level, which is sort of an emotional, deeper, profound connection level. And then that translates into a goal objective, which is a measurable, quantifiable step in that direction. And then you flow it down into projects and then tasks, which is not that uncommon, but there's a very systematic link in everything. And through your review process, your weekly reviews, your monthly reviews, and your quarterly reviews, you're going to check your progress, check what's moving and what's not, and reassess the priorities. Maybe at that point you realize, I just don't have the bandwidth to do all of that. One of these things needs to be at least paused, if not removed. But being realistic about what's doable is a really powerful thing. It helps you get things done.
Yeah.
Being unrealistic and fantasizing really interferes with achieving anything.
So I can think back to the book Essentialism, Greg, the one
Greg
thing. There's that other book. What advice, because I actually struggle with this because I have like kid in a candy store approach to entrepreneurship, where it's like, I want Webflow. I want a great YouTube channel like August. Like I want lighting and this, and I'm one person now two, with Jane's help. How do you have any little heuristics that you use to narrow down to like help you say no?
Well, I've failed enough to realize that I have to make choices. So having put out the system, I sometimes get these either introductions or comments about being just perfect at productivity and this kind of performance design. But the whole reason I have a system like this is because I'm not, perfect at it. Like if I were just effortlessly good at this, I wouldn't need such an intense approach. And it turns out a lot of people are not inherently good at this and are looking for solutions. And that's why this community has formed around it. But it's because I struggle with it myself and I find it really hard. I've had exactly the same problems. I've spread myself too thin. I still do. And then I get bitten by that. So then I ask myself, how do I avoid that? And I can't just trust myself to make good judgments in the moment. So I need guardrails. I need guiding both processes, but also more tangible systems, and software, of course, is optimal for that. So I'm solving weaknesses in myself by developing this kind of approach. And of course, I'm not alone in having such weaknesses, but the people who are naturally gifted at this don't make elaborate systems to address it. They just do it, right? Yeah. So I'm on the same path as everybody who's come to my channel looking for help in this regard. So I'm struggling with it too. Now I have this impulse to tinker and build and fix that may be more, hyped up or more aggressive than most people. So sometimes I come up with things that work and sometimes they don't. But the system is the technique. It's not I don't have slogans. I don't have, mottos. Quotes can inspire, but ultimately motivation doesn't solve the problem. Motivation is super short-lived.
Yeah.
Really short-lived. You need systems, you need processes, you need to make them habits, but making something a habit is a really hard thing. And to do that, you need systems and processes. It's routine. Yeah. I guess if there's one thing, it's realizing that doing something a little bit every day is way more powerful than doing something a lot occasionally.
Oh, yes.
And that ingrains it. That is what changes your identity to incorporate that thing you want in your life.
I love
and ultimately, motivation will not get you there. Willpower will not get you there. Ultimately, your identity has to change to think, I'm a person who eats healthy. Like, it's not like, oh, I really should have the salad instead of the hamburger. It's not, you don't have that debate ultimately when you get there. It's just, I'm a person who has a salad. That's what I do. I don't even debate it. It's just who I am. I'm a person who runs first thing every morning. I go surfing every morning. So you have to make it part of your identity, but that's really hard. But knowing at the outset, that's what you're ultimately trying to get to, at least gives you a clear vision of what you're doing. And that's where I find systems and processes are the most effective way to go through the steps to ultimately have it so ingrained that it's part of your identity.
Got it. Wow, you touched on so much. One, I love the incrementalist approach. That's how I've built RadReads today. I call it the fast tortoise strategy.
Sure.
I've
watched you do it. It's been inspiring. Yeah.
Thank you. And then that question about identity, like I am a person who surfs every day, or I am a person who eats healthy. That is actually one of the best takeaways that I took from James Clear's Atomic Habits, which I think we'll save this for the existential part. Being too attached to an identity has its own set of challenges. And I know my friend Johnny Miller is here. We've talked a lot about that tipping point. But before we dive in, I wanted to ask you, you probably get a lot of feedback and questions from people who come to your channel that are, newbies or trying to start this system design for their own personal lives. I'm always looking for the big domino, the highest leverage thing, question, system, tool. What, if someone doesn't have the time or the Notion expertise that you bring to the table, what do you tell them to get them started in this journey that you've kind of created for yourself over decades?
With Notion in particular, or if it's been decades and it's not Notion in particular?
Yeah, no, I think more just the design question. I'm sure the Notion question will come up as well.
It fundamentally all comes down to being deliberate and intentional in things. Like that's like the ground level recognition. And how elaborate you build the effort to be deliberate and intentional, it scales over time, and that's a choice. But to just in the moment following impulses generally, like overwhelmingly generally, does not get you where you want to go. So recognizing that you're going to have to deliberately and intentionally set out a path, and you'll need to plan the next day, the night before, for example. It's a very simple step that is massively powerful, and I would consider required for effective, certainly work, but also life in general.
Don't do it.
Well, I think planning the next day, the night before, if you want just a simple step, start there, but make the next day realistic. So it's not this impossible to-do list and you're just going to chip away at it and get as far as you can. I mean, as far as you can doesn't mean anything. Say, I'm going to do these 3 things tomorrow, or I'm even going to do this 1 thing tomorrow. And then in the morning when you wake up, list what would make today great. Like what would make today a success. If I do this 1, 2, or 3 things, it can be 1 thing. That's totally fine. Not more than 3 though. Mm-hmm. And if no matter what happens, if you get that 1, 2, or 3 thing done, then today was a success. It takes so little time to do that. Yet it changes everything. So the night before, plan out the whole day with all of your priorities. And then that morning, say, what are the 1 or 2? 1 or 2 is fine. That will make today a success, and just set out to get those 1 or 2 things done. And then fill in the other time with the rest of your schedule. And then the third thing I would tag on to that, if you're open to a third thing,
please.
Is visualization.
I want 100 of them.
Well, I mean, you said what's the simplest first step, so I don't want to get too ambitious. But those things take so little time if you just make that your routine. And then the third thing, if you can tag this on, I think you've got the most impactful 3, which is visualization each morning. So close your eyes after you've defined your 1, 2, or 3 things, and the night before planned out the whole day. When I say plan out the day, I say it's the sequence and the priority of everything you're doing. Ideally, you're doing full-time blocking in a calendar. Like you're really blocking. If you're serious about getting stuff done, you're blocking out every hour of the day, including the fun time, including the rest time, including the family time, including the work time, the reading time, the workout time. I mean, literally on Google Calendar, it can be done to some extent in Notion. But if you're frustrated with not getting the things done that you say you're going to do every day, just go to time blocking the night before. And then that morning say, of all that, what do I really need to get done for today to be a success? And make that hurdle totally doable. 1, 2, or 3 things. And then that morning after you make that list, close your eyes for 3 or 4 minutes and visualize yourself going through the day flawlessly, just as you had planned it, including the break time, the transition time between them, because that's usually one of the hardest things. Like you finish one thing, great. And then you go off and you go down the YouTube video rabbit hole. You go on the
Dark
Twitter
chocolate over
threads
here.
or whatever you're into. And then you feel good. You did one thing, and now you can cut yourself some slack. Well, that's okay if you scheduled that slack in there. It's okay to schedule a break time in there. But visualize yourself going off and doing your break and then coming back at the next point for the next item on the priority list, and walk yourself through the day with the transitions, with the initial quick start, with some downtime, and just visualize yourself doing it, making this mental model of what the day would look like if it went just according to plan. Now, if surprises come up, you deal with them. It's okay to change the plan, but you've set a default path. And now you're not just going to wander aimlessly. So now if you wander off of it, you know what you're avoiding. You know what you're missing. There's a clear alternative that's been explicitly defined. And so that, without technology, without a lot of sophistication, anyone can do.
Oh,
It'll change your days.
this is so good.
And if you take care of your days, the weeks will take care of themselves, and the months will take care of themselves.
Incredible. Oh, I got chills. Maybe that's a great segue to dive in. Like I said, we're going to spend 15, 20 minutes from walking through a few of your dashboards. Then we'll just open it up to the fun stuff. We're going to drop August YouTube channel. Everyone go smash that subscribe button right now. And so many videos there. So we're just going to do a quick tour. And then we will we'll open it up to Q&A, because it's not fair that I get to ask all the questions.
And just to those who don't know, that the YouTube channel is about this entire system. It walks through section by section. That's the whole thing of the YouTube channel, at least at this stage, till we finish it. All right, so just jumping into share.
You should have access.
Yes, I do have access. There we go. Is that looking good on your end?
Yep.
All right.
Beautiful.
Okay, so do you want to zero in somewhere, or do you want me to do just the fast overview? As I said, focus and alignment are the keys.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I would love to focus on focus, because it seems to tie exactly with what the advice you've just been giving us.
Okay.
And then if we have a little bit of time, the barbell, like the tip of the spear, the tip of the pyramid, like the why.
Yeah, and then that's the alignment. Yeah.
So yeah, focus and alignment.
But jumping into focus, let me just reiterate what we said earlier, which is that it's the most important thing is that you're working on the right thing. So that's step one. Step two is then making sure you do the thing that you've identified as the right thing when you say you're going to do it. So this is my overall dashboard. It's just basically an organization of the system. Action zone is the focus area. So action zone is all about focus. Alignment zone is all about alignment. So those are the two most important dashboards in the whole system. Now, within this, we've got a number of toggles that just give me relevant views. But after I do my morning setup, I live my whole day in this one toggle, the today action items toggle. And I left some of the early stuff in just to show how I've lined up today. So this is going to give me last night, I lined these up as the things I'm going to do today with priority settings. Now, just super quickly, immediate means that's the first thing I do when I sit down. I'm going to prepare the system here to share publicly on the RadReads program here. Got a couple quick items. Anything that's just a few minutes that I can just knock out of the way are quick items that I can just plow through and shorten my list quickly. Anything that's scheduled is here with a time. These will be lumped together so I won't miss anything that's scheduled. And then first, second, third priority. These will go up to fifth, but I try to keep it to 1, 2, 3, depending on how big they are. But those are the priorities that I need to get done today to make today a success. It's all right there. Daily tracking is also the other half of this. So these are the action items, the tasks, which are fulfilling projects in many cases. And then they're the habits and routines, which is the other half of it. That's across daily tracking here. And first thing I do in the morning, as I enter, I click new, and because this is filtered for today, it automatically enters today's date. And so I will just do the first section of this based on my Oura Ring data and some basic biometrics I enter every morning that I'm tracking to see if I'm progressing in the direction I want to on certain habits and routines and goals I've set for myself. Then once I've done that, I jump back over here, and throughout the day, I've got my habit tracker. So I'm just checking these things off as I go through the day in the sequence that I do them. So I do a Readwise spaced repetition app process at least once a day. I meditate. I do my bullet planner, mindset work, visualization. I haven't done that. Got cut short a little bit on time this morning, but I will circle back to it. And this reminds me of everything I haven't done that I want to do every single day to build it into that identity. And ultimately, I won't need this, but this is how I build it into my identity. I have this staring me in the face in this one toggle view that I spend all my day in after I've done my morning startup. The rest of the day is spent here until the end of day wind down. And this tracks the percent of my habits that I've completed. And that's it. That's my day. That's focus. Now, in lining these up, I'll come down to the calendar view, which is super helpful the night before. I can just drag things across and reassign things in terms of laying out the plan. The one key thing here that I haven't mentioned that is not too common in systems is I have a due date, a DO date. I also have a due date, a DUE date, but I don't use that very often, and only if there's obviously a hard consequence for not getting something done. But every single item in my action items database, which is my task database, has a DO date, a due date. And that means I am setting up, and I'll plan that out about a week ahead of time, sometimes 2 weeks, usually about 1 week, with a few things that I have further out that I just know are going to come up. So I'll just throw them out there. But that lets me line up all the tasks that need to advance projects. And it lets me set up a to-do list for each day. Instead of having one giant, burdensome to-do list that I just chip away at and never have any chance of completing, I have a to-do list for each day. And each of those is totally doable. It may be a reach. It shouldn't be easy. It should be a bit of a challenge, but it's possible. I could complete the entire to-do list for each day. And if it's getting too big, I just move it to another day's to-do list. So each to-do list is totally manageable, not overwhelming, and I have a good shot of having that incredible satisfaction of completing my to-do list, which is not the case if you have one giant one that's just constantly rolling over. So basically for each week, I'm setting up a to-do list for each day. Now this is an outline. This can change if things come up and interrupt. Then we roll things over and we adjust it. But if nothing major comes up, then this is the execution plan. And it's laid out, and to deviate from it it's obvious if I'm deviating from it. And I know that I'm off track. It's clear to me when I'm off track. If you don't have a day planned, then you can go off on any tangent and you're not off track because you don't have a track. You have to actually have a path to be on to be aware that you're going off track. So if you're just going to be floating around randomly and you don't have a day planned, I mean, you're not even off track because you don't have a track. So you need to define what the right track is. And then when you go off of it, you've got this nagging question. Is what I'm doing justified? Is it significant enough to deviate from what I planned? And it forces you to confront that question, which is a really important question whenever you start going off on a tangent in the middle of the day. Sometimes it is, but oftentimes it's not. But make it deliberate. You can, but you have to make the choice that it's more important. Anyway, so you're setting up the to-do list for each day, and that lets you lay things out in a calendar. Sometimes it's laid out further, sometimes it's short. But it also means as I go into projects, I have the second toggle here for projects. And for each project, let's jump into what I'm developing, a new website and rebranding. In this one, you're managing all the tasks for that project. Now, for the next week or two, you're asking what do you want to get done immediately. So you're going to make the tasks for that project that are queued up in the next week or so active, and they'll have due dates. The rest of them are paused, next up, or future. They don't have due dates or priorities. But during a weekly review, you're reviewing every single project you have that's active, and you're making sure every project has an active, at least one, if not more, active task queued up with a due date. And therefore it'll roll right into the day that it's assigned to, and it's impossible to miss anything, to ignore anything. If you finish these, you'll typically try to add a new active task for that project. But if you forget, then when the weekly review comes around, you'll queue up the next one. So you'll always have active tasks queued up for any active project, and that's how you make sure projects get done. So that's as simple. I mean, there's nothing more to it really than that. It's just assigning the date you plan to do each thing the night before, seeing if that lineup is realistic, and prioritizing them, the sequence in which you're going to do them, and then doing them. And then lining that up day by day. The night before, you get really specific on what's happening the next day. But the week beyond the next day is a general outline of what you intend to do. And that's how I do focus.
That's great. So I'm gonna grab a question that I saw because I had the same one. Um, with so many tasks and projects, how do you prioritize what happens, for each day?
Well, first of all, I don't have that many tasks or projects.
That's true. Yeah,
So,
you had five
um,
projects, I think I saw.
yeah, and this can vary. This could, I mean, you could have one project or two projects. One,
Hmm.
I've never had one. You could get down to two, or you could have eight or nine. But
Hmm.
so the projects, these are the active projects.
Okay.
You can throw in projects, and then at some point, and then you have to decide what's going to be active and what's down the road. So in the alignment zone is where I'll manage the projects. That's where I'm executing on projects. In the
Hmm.
alignment zone, it's got two areas. Insight is, more deeper insights on who you are and what you want to become, and reviewing how you're proceeding. But the pillar pipeline pyramid is really the thing that's about alignment, starting with action items. These are the tasks we were just looking at, and projects, and then it rolls up to goals, the two different kind
Hmm.
of goals. We can talk about those, but the two steps just helps you come to better goals. And then pillars is an organization of your life. We can get into that, but I will define the projects in this project view, which is I have it set up so that it has the active project view we just saw up here. That's a quick, easy way to see some stats and jump into it. And then down here, I've got this Kanban board of active and on hold and next up and future. So certainly if I finish one and have more bandwidth, I'm going to be looking at what's next that I want to move over here. Some of these I've started, but I didn't have the bandwidth, so I put them on hold. Next up are never started, but next in the queue. So I'm just constantly once a week during my weekly review. The most important part of my weekly review is determining making sure every project has at least one active task.
Yep.
And if not, assigning that, sometimes two or three. And then the monthly review is largely about making sure every goal has active projects lined up, or at least the ones that are priorities have active projects. So weekly is about determining tasks relative to projects, and monthly is determining projects relative to goals. Now that'll line up which are here, but in the middle of a week, for example, or middle of a month, I could complete enough projects that I clearly have room for more, and then I just jump in here and see what's next, what's most important. So this visual representation lets me wrap my mind around everything that's relevant, and it just brings clarity and transparency to that choice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty vivid when you lay it out properly. And so, yeah.
I was going to ask you to go to the top of the pyramid, but maybe could we spend 5 minutes on reviews?
Yes.
Would that
Yeah,
work?
it can. Let me just talk about it conceptually. I can't jump into them because that's the one area I haven't totally cleaned up
Okay.
in terms of broadcast, but I can go into my template if that's helpful.
Okay. Yeah.
In fact, that might be easier. So first of all, I do weekly reviews, monthly reviews, and I do quarterly reviews, which a lot of people don't. But to me, quarterly reviews make the monthly reviews easier because it's stuff that need to be done in the monthly review if I'm not doing a quarterly review. So it just makes a lighter load on 2 of the 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
So some just depending on how the frequency certain things need to be done. But let's jump over. I'm going to change to a different screen because I opened one for the weekly review. So the weekly review, this is the template itself. So it's not filled out, but it has a ton of roll-ups. I showed you how I entered my habit tracking and certain metrics that I'm tracking daily. Now, all of those days will link to the weekly review. And because of those days being linked, I've got tons of roll-ups. All these magnifying glass icons are roll-ups. So it'll bring all this information, fitness stats, averaging and totals, or outliers and divergent. It'll basically bring in all the stats from my daily metrics that matter to me. Some of them are business oriented, some of them are personal fitness or health oriented, some of them are just growth oriented in various ways. So you got lots rolling up because you have each day from the daily tracking linked. So that's a really powerful use of Notion that you couldn't really do in any other platform. So I'll go through and do these basic stats, but the key to the weekly review is going through. Now my system is called Pillars, Pipelines, and Vaults, and everything falls sort of into one of these 3 categories. Pillars are the higher level aspirations and guiding principles of your life. Pipelines are the task, project, and goal-oriented things that go through stages of process and are more action-oriented. Vaults are about knowledge management and capturing a wealth of knowledge and resources and information that you can draw on as needed. So I basically organize everything throughout the system by those 3 categories. So first we do the high level review. I'll click here. I'll go to my guiding principles. Every week I will do a quick skim of my guiding principles. The guiding principles are the result of a very in-depth 1 to 2 day, maybe even 3 day review process that I do every 12 months. And out of that come a very succinct series of bullet points in a few different categories. And I will review those every week, because typically we'll do this big in-depth assessment of our life and what matters to us and what we value. And then we won't see it again for 6 months or 9 months, and we will just drift away from it. Well, the key to me is to make it short enough that once a week you can read it in like 2 minutes, even a minute and a half. And then it stays close to you. You're not changing it. You're not working on it. You're just reading the bullet points so that they remain close in top of mind. And then I'll do my weekly reflection. I'll enter any major accomplishments for the week, any major disappointments for the week. This becomes very interesting when you start looking at the monthly, quarterly, and certainly annual level. I'll note any highlights, lows, struggles, and most importantly, what I learned that week, which is also being entered in here somewhere so that it rolls up to the monthly and quarterly. Then I'll go through the pipelines. You do the inbox, your mail, make sure your mail inbox is under control. My start items in the mailbox are under control. We're checking the calendar. We're checking the databases. So the key databases here are, I've got one of the designations of my tasks is if I need to wait on somebody to complete something before I can move forward, it moves out of active status into waiting status. And you'll see this more and more as we go through this, but these toggles let me actively manage my waiting list right here in the review page. I don't have to go jumping around the system to different places to execute on these. I open the toggle, I've got my waiting list right there. I can check whether I need to follow up or whether it's still within a reasonable amount of time, all the items that I'm waiting on. Projects, I can open up my project view right here and manage my projects in the quarters that they're aligned with right here in this view on this page. And then my planning's done. And then I'll add a new week to my weekly review database. So I can start tagging the next days for the next week to that week. Then in Vaults, I do some cleanup and management. I've got access to my Vaults here. I just this week switched to a new media Vault, so I've got to update that link. But any of the organization, I still bring in clippings. I still use Evernote. That's my bottomless shoebox for things I might maybe potentially someday want, but I'm not sure. So I'll just dump them there so I'm not clogging my Notion system. My Notion vaults, which are my knowledge management areas, are for things I'm actively working on, things that I know that have relevance to what I'm doing. So I'll, at times when I start new efforts that I'm building up new knowledge vault categories, I will pull in old stuff from Evernote and migrate that over. And then I'll manage the knowledge vault topics. That's the whole knowledge management category we can dive into if you want, but that's a whole separate thing. Update books, update notes, do paper inbox processing. I have a written journal. Sometimes I'll import the image here, and that's it. I can do this in 25 to 30 minutes every week. And if I do that, my life is in order. And then similarly, there's a monthly review, which is more focused on more high level things and queuing up the right projects. Whereas this is making sure all the active projects have the right tasks queued up.
Got it. And what's the distinction between monthly and quarterly?
Quarterly gets into, let's jump back to the other page, to the alignment zone. It's just depending, as you're going through your monthly review, think of what needs to really be done monthly or what can wait quarterly. So reviewing pillars are my entire life broken out into different segments. And then the value goals are my highest level aspirations, the things I really want to achieve in my life. So those things don't necessarily need to be reviewed every month. They're not changing that often. And everything else is linked to them so that they're still pretty top of mind. So any review of value goals or pillars tends to be quarterly. It doesn't have to happen that often. Whereas monthly, I need to be really on top of my goal outcomes, which are the quantifiable, measurable goals, the physical, like the really practical implementation of my goals and their alignment with projects or habits. So that tends to be a monthly activity, executing on those. But I never have to think about this. Like the checklist just guides me. Like when I set it up, I think about it and then I just follow the program.
Got it. And is pillars, I bet a lot of folks here are familiar with Tiago's PARA system. Pillars is areas like?
it's the most areas like of all of them, but not really. I mean, it's a little bit hard to compare because para has different descriptions depending on where you're reading it. I mean, even areas, it's the most similar, but areas, as I understand it, and I've read his material pretty much depth, so I think I do. That's maintaining a certain high level standard across certain categories of your life. Whereas my pillars, as I'm defining them here, are literally every single thing in your life broken into categories. So this is less about maintaining a standard and more just breaking your entire life into somewhere between 5 and 12 categories. So it's really purely an organizational structure. It's not aspirational. The aspirational objectives are set in value goals. This is an organizational element. So this is going to lay out everything in your life is going to fall into these, and you're trying to set them up such that each of them has a meaningful amount of activity. So it's roughly equivalent, of course, not perfectly so. And it just breaks out each of the major categories of your life and covers every single thing. That lets you do a lot of organization across other databases through relations. And it also means, and in this way, it's similar to areas. This will also be your organizational structure across other systems in Dropbox, in OneNote or Evernote or Google Drive. For me, I would actually have the top level organization be growth, business, home life. And then the next category would be the subsections, which are the actual pillars. But of course, only using the ones that are relevant in the other platforms.
Yeah. Very cool. So we could go on this we just scratched the surface here.
One of the, just to be on clarity, but para and second brain is all about knowledge management.
Yeah.
This is doing action-oriented stuff as well as knowledge management. So in a sense, in terms of scope, this is GTD plus para in terms of scope. Of course, it's doing things differently, but whereas para would really fully function in my vault section.
Got it.
Which is where you're capturing and using knowledge and information.
We might have to do a separate Q&A just on the vault.
For sure.
Cool. I'll ask you to unshare and there's some questions coming up that cool. I will go into. Okay, so let's see. One of the questions that I saw was from Prashant. And we spoke about this a bit, and I'll read the question so you don't have to go search them. How would you suggest a beginner go about setting up a life OS along the PPV system? So I'll answer that first. Okay. I would say there's a playlist that literally walks you through it, because August might be too modest to say it, but there's a literal playlist that will get you there. But I want to take you back to the first question, the earlier question that we said about the big domino, which is plan out your tasks, plan out your projects, map out 3 per day, and do the visualization exercise. That will get, I don't do that. I'm adding that tomorrow morning or tonight. That will probably get you a long, long way. And I think it's really important in these conversations, where August and I, our careers, our businesses, our hobbies are centered around geeking out on Notion. Let's remember that why the tool is in service of, August has it perfectly, like life alignment, right? And so you can always remember that when you're tempted to do a roll up or some formula to create a progress bar that you've seen on YouTube. Just remember that hierarchy is like, what am I working on? How does it align to my bigger life vision and kind of the multiple steps in between? And you can do that on a pen and paper. You can do that in Evernote. You could do that in GTD, in OmniFocus or things. Yes, you can add the bells and whistles. And I like to say that a lot of, if you think of the Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule, 80% of it is habits, planning, asking the right questions, building the right behavior change. That last 20% is Notion versus Airtable versus Roam versus GTD. So unless you're out of that 80% zone, and that's someone that's like August, who's committed a kind of a life and passion to it, you can get a lot of the benefits from very, very simple approaches. and don't get lost in all of the don't get lost in all of the features.
Yes.
But
So let me put a little caveat to that. I agree with everything you just said, of course, 100%. However, I do have a non-conventional thought on one aspect of this that I think you might even disagree with. So you can feel free to challenge me if you do, which is I think systems designing, okay, that's 100% what you just said. But if you're going to go to the next step to having an elaborate, a fully conceived system, I believe it's better to design a system for a specific software platform than to have a general system like Second Brain or GTD for that matter, that can adapt to any system. Especially now that we're getting into the level of systems that Notion enables and Coda enables and even Airtable. This next generation of software is opening up possibilities. And by designing a system specifically for Notion, I believe I'm able to leverage that platform far better than a general fit-all software agnostic approach, which I think is better for selling to a larger audience, but doesn't take it all the way to maximize what a particular platform can provide.
Yeah, I would say so. I'm in this group of productivity folks where they reach this level of productivity and then they give it all up. And because what happens,
meaning give it all up, give it away to others, or stop?
No, they just like stop caring.
Okay.
And because what's happened is two things. One is they've internalized so much of the behaviors that they can kind of do a weekly review without, line by line item, but they're still doing some version of that. And it might even be semi-subconscious. The second is that they might realize that they're actually, for what they want out of life, squeezing water out of a stone. And so they reach, and this is where my existential questioning comes in, and they kind of like, maybe they realize like, what's the point of all this, right? And I think this is why, so I agree with you in having a system customized to the tool, because there's so much precision in everything. Like every step is intentional. And then the contrast would be, maybe it's an outlier, and I'm not putting myself in that category, is someone that's just like able to just shoot from the hip nonstop through some combination of intuition, luck, good genes, and experience, that could probably find that, orient to their outcomes. And so I always think about the tension between the two, and then my original comment was more aimed at people starting out.
Yes. Yeah. So let me come back to that.
Yeah.
But certainly a very structured system is not for everybody. People need to sort themselves out on what's the right fit for their approach. And through different life stages, you'll have different needs, and perhaps the stakes are less high after you've made your a good, comfortable amount. You can sort of be more casual, but if you're in a stage where you really need to perform and deliver, you might be more aggressive about it. So, it's going to vary from person to situation. In terms of just starting out, if you want to start out with, I think the question was specifically about my system.
Yeah.
That's pretty clear at this point in terms of what's available now. I'm actually working very hard to make an easier on-ramp, and that's coming. But right now, starting out is actually the easiest part. The middle part gets harder, because right now I have a template for the alignment zone that gives you your task database, and it gives you the project database, and it's all interconnected, just as I showed you in the focus conversation we had, the alignment zone. So I would just get that template as part of my template pack and start using that. That's really set up. Then you need to start building the alignment zone. I don't have that available, the template at this point, but that's pretty, I recommend people start at the bottom up rather than top down. Top down is helpful for explaining it, but for actually implementing it, I recommend bottom up, because you can start using it right away. Once you have the task database, you can start planning your days and doing your tasks, just like you did on Todoist. Then you can add the projects, and then you can sort of work your way up to goals. But you can start using it right away. And it's actually easier to build the additional layers if you've got data flowing through it at the lower layers.
Yeah.
So but start with the tasks. Just make it your new task manager, and then start organizing projects. And that template just lets you do it without even doing any building. And then start tracking your data that's relevant to, to you and what you want to achieve.
All right, next question. Let's see. There's a Rome question. I'm going to save that one for the end. There's a theoretical question that asks, what do you think of the theoretical idea that value lies as much or more in relationships than in achieving goals?
Oh, okay, that's a great question. It's a great question, especially given the nature of our conversation thus far. Well, I would certainly agree with that, but you don't need to pick one or the other. I mean, they're not mutually exclusive by any means, right? Yeah. And in fact, they can enhance. In fact, they do enhance each other. Relationships help you achieve your goals, and goals help you build the kinds of relationships you want with the kinds of people you want in your life. So, I don't see any competition between those two categories whatsoever. In fact, goals could be to build better relationships, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're totally complementary.
And I would say that a lot of, I have birthday calculators in Notion where it gives me a list of upcoming birthdays. So I just call friends. And so it's the tool in service of the goal, which is to, be a great friend and family member. And so I totally,
I just referred a client to your video on that. Yeah, that's a perfect example.
Awesome. Okay. There's one question about the, let's see. There was a question from Johnny that said, if you lost all of your templates and archive tomorrow and didn't have the backup, he said, where would you start from scratch? But I think you actually just answered that. So I'm gonna skip that question. Let me go into the Rome question, because I know you use both. I use both as well. Probably a little bit less meticulously than you, based on some of the videos.
I'm using Rome less and less, so we can get into that.
Okay. Yeah. So maybe just talk about, give a 10-second introduction of what Rome is, and I can add to that, and how you use them together, what purpose it serves, and why you might be using it less.
Sure. Okay, I did. And if anyone wants to go deeper on my thoughts on how I use it, I did a whole video on this on Francesco's Keep Productive channel. So Rome is what they call a networked thought application, a cloud SaaS software application, and it's really cool and intriguing. It as you enter notes, you will hyperlink. You'll add a hyperlink to a word, and if that word has a page already, you'll link to that page, and it will link back to this page. And if it doesn't exist, it'll create the page, and then any future links will go to that page. You end up creating this almost like what looks like a neural network, all these hubs and nodes interlinking effortlessly just through inline links as you're typing and creating. And of course, you can do more structured tags at the top if you wish. And then you jump into those other pages, and they'll have a network of links and pages outward. And then one of the cool innovations is you can go to I think they call it a graph mode. I'm not sure the name of it, but a visualization of all the nodes and hubs of all these interconnected bidirectional links. And it's a very free-flowing, unstructured way to take notes, capture highlights from information sources, and have it all sort of linked in the way that our brain has these neural networks, and you strengthen knowledge by strengthening relationships between different nodes. There's a really interesting analogy to how our brains work. So that's kind of compelling and interesting. And it's very fast and effortless to enter stuff, because you don't have to add the structure and hierarchy that other systems like a database would require. And so it's been very appealing to a lot of people. The value I saw in it, different people see different value in it, but the most obvious value I saw is that it would help you create serendipity and rediscover links as you're researching new things that you already had discovered elsewhere in the system, and it'll create connections to them automatically without you even linking. It'll also recommend links to other things that you've previously entered. So it creates this giant neural network. So I was thinking this would be valuable, and to some degree it is, to have, creativity and new ideas is ultimately usually about combining unusual things, not just a truly original idea. So it seemed like a great way to have some serendipity and and unexpected discoveries of relations between different things that you've thought about in the past that would all come together, and that would help form better thinking and better ideas. And a lot of people are really committed to this approach. There are two problems I'm finding. One is, first of all, there's just a burden to maintain a Roam system and a Notion system. And I'm doing some things in Notion that I think are really powerful and have been super effective for me for knowledge management that are just really working. So I'm very happy with Notion for knowledge management already. The Roam people are really dismissive of Notion for knowledge management, and I just think they don't understand the capabilities and how far you can take Notion. Now, it may be the case that I don't understand Roam enough. So I'm admitting that right up front. I know Notion way better than I know Roam. But first of all, translating, I was taking my best, most precious gems of insight and ideas and information from Notion, and then adding those to Roam and letting that system make its own networks and introduce new ideas and have them combine and collide. But the translation is a bit of a burden and a little bit hard to maintain, even though I'm just taking the best of my ideas that are bubbling up through my Notion system, which I'm elaborating on my channel. Now, so there's that burden of translating, but also a lot of people have abandoned all the structured approaches and using Roam exclusively. And to me, that just seems like an unpredictable, unreliable mess. Like, you'll find some cool stuff, but you'll miss a lot of stuff too. And I don't trust that it'll give me what I need when I need it. Whereas Notion, I know it's going to give me what I need when I need it. And largely that's because of the way I've structured my knowledge management area. So I think I've pushed Notion pretty far in knowledge management. And so I feel as covering it. I don't think a lot of the people on the Roam side who are dismissing it really understand what it's capable of. But I find the lack of structure, and maybe just because I have a structured thinking, I'm a systems and process guy. So that may say more about me than it does about Roam or Roam users. It may just have an inclination towards less structure. There are pros and cons. Ultimately, it seems to me Roam is a feature more than an application. And I would love to see that feature in more other platforms.
And the thing that's Notion actually has the possibility, because it operates at the block level.
Sure does.
So it's close. So I don't know. Fingers crossed on that one. I was curious, and they've seen in the comments, people are already clamoring for round 2, which will probably be your knowledge vault. But you said you've pushed the envelope on knowledge management in Roam. Can you give us
Notion?
In Notion,
not in Roam.
That's what I meant. Freudian slip. Can you give us the teaser on something that, someone like me has been using Notion for a while? What's something surprising about your approach to knowledge management that I might say, oh,
well, I don't think it's surprising, but I think you might be like, okay, that's a good idea. I don't think it's not going to floor you like, oh, I didn't know Notion could do that. It's not that revolutionary.
I'm easily surprised.
Well, fundamentally, knowledge management, I think, needs two things. One is, especially there are two types of knowledge, right? There are your notes and ideas that are sourced from you and the conversations you have. And then there's the information and resources. So I'm capturing all those. I've just implemented, I did a video on it. My most recent video is on the RadReads integration with Notion. Have you seen this? It's fantastic. Yep. The automation of highlights, it's fantastic. So it is a paid service, so it costs a little bit. But with that just solves the problem of capturing notes in Pocket and Instapaper and Kindle. And so that's bringing that in effortlessly. And with notes and ideas, and with information sources, there are two key things. One is ease of capture. So that RadReads integration takes ease of capture of articles and books to a next level. There with notes and ideas, I've created an interface and placed that quick capture interface for notes and ideas in all the key places across my system, like in my action zone, in the today toggle. That top toggle above the to-do list was a notes and ideas quick entry location in the top of my mind expansion dashboard, which is my knowledge management dashboard. So I've got quick entry in all the key locations. The other half of knowledge management is that what you capture, it resurfaces at the right time at the right place. Like, that's the crux of it. And this is where Notion is so good, because we have the self-referencing filters in other databases. So in the same way that in the projects, we'll have the tasks for that project listed and filtered in a task database view, in my Okay, so I've got 3 layers to my knowledge management. I guess I needed to lay this out. I have to explain it in some detail to make it make sense. We have Notes and Ideas database. There's just 3 databases. Okay. Notes and Ideas, Media Vault, which is capturing the articles. And then the final one, which is the culmination, is the Knowledge Vault. That's where, while the other 2 are organized by input source, yourself or different magazines and books, the Knowledge Vault is organized by topic. So this is every topic that you want to gain knowledge in, get smarter in, have access to a depth of information in. So everything from the Notes and Ideas are funneling into the Knowledge Vault topics, and everything in the Media Vault is funneling into the Knowledge Vault topics. And now within each Knowledge Vault topic, you open it up, you've got a self-referencing filter for your Notes and Ideas and for your media. That's whenever you enter an article, you're tagging it to the relevant topics. Whenever you enter a note and idea, you're tagging it to the relevant topics. And so all of them are resurfacing, filtered by last edited, at the top of the place you're aggregating all your thinking on those different categories. So then it's very easy to alt drag that down into the body of knowledge you're building.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So we can demonstrate that in more detail. But yeah, so Notion is great at resurfacing contextually.
Yeah.
And that's like the whole game for knowledge management.
Yeah. I dropped a link in where I've been playing with a feature where you use your own metadata to score things. And then based off of the score and the last edited date, it kind of resurfaces things. Because like something that has a score of a 10, which could be as simple as like you wrote a description about it, makes that a 7, and you tagged it, might make it an 8 out of 10. And so then if you haven't reviewed that idea or note in 6 months, it surfaces up into like a knowledge inbox that's like, hey, look at me. And you either can dismiss it, like kind of swipe left or swipe right, and just kind of do something more with it.
And again, Notion is uniquely capable of doing that.
Yeah.
Try doing that in Rome.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we are, I think we are approaching our time limit. One of the Prashant astutely observed that that one of your projects was launching a first course. So he would like to know when that course will be launched, and he would like submit his credit card information to purchase it right now. But tell us about what's in the pipeline for your budding empire.
Right. So, I don't know about empire, but the course is going to be very specific. It's not going to be just a general Notion course. There's some very good ones out there, yours among them, and Marie's and Francesco's have great general courses that already teach you Notion. Although yours is more specific to life performance. Mine's going to be ultimately creating an easier on-ramp to the PPV system I've been showing on the YouTube channel. One of the difficulties is the channel, in order to cover as much as I want to cover, doesn't start from scratch. So you need to know Notion somewhat to even really follow them. So that's a bit of a imperfect setup. So the course will take you from scratch to a very successful implementation of the PPV life operating system, but it will also be a lot of how to take the principles behind it and ingrain them into your life. So it's going to be maybe half about Notion and getting up to speed with the operating system. And then, but more significantly, I think, once you have that in place, what it enables and brings to your life, and to enrich it and to help you lead the more deliberate life, to get to the things you want, to find the meaning and become the person you want. It's about all that beyond Notion itself. So it's Notion's a platform to get to a different level of life experience. And so it's going to be half about Notion, getting you fully up to speed on the Notion system from scratch, and then to apply it in the most profound way possible. And so in terms of timing, I'm going to be in about 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, I'll be launching, rebranding my whole system, my consulting, my whole business on a new platform that's really geared more towards a learning platform. And then the course, this will be the first of a series of courses that I'm rolling out onto that new platform. So I'm hoping the course will be out in about 2 months.
Very cool. Well, we'll make sure to share it with everyone in the RadReads community. And I just wanted to point out, I've had August, we had Marie on, and this is what's so cool about the Notion community is that we're not competitors. We're all lifting each other up. A rising tide is going to lift all ships. We're all very different snowflakes, although that has a bad connotation these days. But this is what's really magical about the Notion community is that we all are rooting for each other. And honestly, that's a lot of the RadReads ethos. And that's just kind of like that's the kind of society that I want to live in.
But it's totally true. I mean, it's not even just a kind gesture. It's actually true in part because what we're all doing with Notion is like the skeletal system, but we're building so much flesh and muscle and life and around it that people are jumping between, or people are taking multiple courses, not just to learn Notion, but to learn the life philosophies and the life approaches across all of those different, different perspectives, the different people trying to teach their approach to it. Did we lose Kay?
No, I'm here.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So a different picture popped up. Anyways, so I wondered if we lost it. So yeah, I mean, it's not just about learning the basics of Notion, which frankly is quite easy. What's harder then is to learn the systems, because systems are harder than just basic implementation. But then beyond that, the really profound impact is what you learn about yourself and what you can do with your life from the lessons that are sort of embedded in the grain of the Notion system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on that
I would love to
note,
take your class. In fact, I fully intend to at some point. So even though I know Notion and I know my system, I know I would learn so much from your class above all that.
The door is open. Next class launches on the 14th. So
Awesome.
we will see you there. We will roll out the red carpet for
Beautiful.
the most famous student. That is a good ending question from Prashant. 3-book recommendation, or let's just say 2. One in the world of the things that we've talked about, and one in just kind of the August Bradley canon of life.
Well, I mean, when I give book recommendations, it's really tailored to a person in their circumstances, right? Like I don't literally have a generic one. One of the most profound books for me of all time is one I recommend if somebody's ready for it.
Okay.
But a lot of people are not ready for it, which is Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. Like a lot of people will read that and go, whatever. But then some people will read it and it will radically change their lives. You have to be like ready for it. But and some of them are obvious, but if you're just starting out, I think they're the necessary starting place. So let's assume, okay, so if you want to, so Power of Now, I would say James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. If you haven't studied habits, it's the place to start.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the most concise, succinct distillation of ideas, of all the other ideas out there. I don't think I don't know if those are original. I've been hearing those ideas for years, but he has really done an amazing job of bringing them together in a very accessible form. Yeah. So I think that's the starting place. Then it depends on what's your circumstance. What do you need next?
Okay, I'll do one. Someone who's contemplating a career change.
Oh. I'm going to career books, but I'm inclined to look for a Seth Godin book, although I don't know the right one offhand. I just think there's so much wisdom in pretty much everything Seth Godin puts out. And if you're thinking career and how to make yourself valuable to society, I just think Seth Godin first. Yep. I mean, Linchpin is sort of his masterwork.
Indispensable. Oh, Linchpin, yeah.
That's sort of his masterwork. So I guess the safe one would be Linchpin. Yeah. But the other books are so short. It's nice to recommend them because they're so easy. Anyone can just sit down and read it. Dip is amazing. Yeah. So many of them. But if I have one global book for all, I guess it would be Linchpin.
Linchpin. God, I read that a long time ago. Yeah. Awesome. Well, everyone will be sharing the replay. Just the chat is rich with resources. We'll put that in an email. Most importantly, August templates are available. Again, they've been dropped in a few times. Go sign up to his newsletter, go follow watch his YouTube channel, and then follow him on Twitter. There were some questions we didn't get to answer. I know that August is super active on Twitter. I am as well. If you ask us on Twitter, we'll definitely answer them there.
Sure. And thank you, Kay. This has been a real privilege. I've been a big fan and reader of RadReads for a long time, so it's super exciting to join you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and thank you, August.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a lot of fun.